The North Atlantic in March 1943 was a graveyard of steel and ice. Convoys crept eastward through seas that swallowed sound, visibility, and men whole. The water was an iron grey, cold enough to kill within minutes, deep enough to hide an entire fleet. Below those waters, the U-boats of Admiral Karl Dönitz's Kriegsmarine prowled like wolves in a snowstorm. Above, the merchantmen and their thin screens of escorts formed what Allied sailors grimly called the meat convoys. That spring, the Battle of the Atlantic had reached its crescendo. The Germans were sinking Allied shipping faster than it could be built. 108 vessels lost in March alone, nearly 700,000 tons of supplies meant for Britain. The North Atlantic route had become a gauntlet of destruction. Convoy HX-229 and SC-122 had just been mauled by coordinated wolfpack attacks. 21 ships sunk in a single running battle. British Admiralty analysts warned that another month of such losses might cripple the war effort. The answer came not in heavier armour, but in new hunters. The US Navy called them hunter-killer groups, mobile teams built around small escort carriers and their destroyer escorts, designed not to protect convoys, but to seek out and destroy submarines. At the heart of this new doctrine was technology, radar, sonar, and a lethal new weapon known as the Hedgehog. And at the centre of it all steamed one of the first of her class, USS Buckley DE 51. The Buckley slid out of Boston Navy Yard that March, her hull still smelling of primer and hot paint. She was small compared to fleet destroyers, just over 300 feet long, displacing 1,400 tons. But what she lacked in size, she made up for in sensors and speed. Her bridge bristled with antennae. Her bow hid the new Hedgehog projector, an array of 24 small spigot mortars that could throw a curtain of contact-fused bombs hundreds of yards ahead. For the first time, a destroyer could attack without losing sonar contact. Her captain, Lieutenant Commander Brent Abel, was 34 years old, a Californian with the lean, weather-beaten look of a man who had spent too much time at sea. A pre-war Navy reservist and gunnery instructor, Abel had requested sea duty after Pearl Harbor. Now he found himself leading a ship built for a kind of warfare no one had yet mastered. The crew was young, 15 officers, 198 enlisted men, most of them fresh out of boot camp or radar school. A few veterans from the older destroyers, survivors of the early convoy years, called them kids with gadgets. But even the skeptics knew the game had changed. Buckley's Combat Information Center, the new nerve center of the ship, was a jungle of glowing scopes, echo repeaters, and voice tubes. On her mast spun a SA radar set, able to track periscopes or snorkels poking just inches above the waves. Below decks, her sonar operators could hear the ping of steel against the heartbeat of the ocean itself. As Buckley joined Task Group 21.11, commanded by the formidable Captain Daniel Faith Gallery aboard the escort carrier USS Bogue, the mission was clear. Sweep the mid-Atlantic gap, that deadly stretch beyond the reach of land-based aircraft, and kill every submarine they could find. The first patrol was a trial by water and wind. The North Atlantic in late March was a place of punishment, 30-foot seas, freezing rain, and visibility that vanished without warning. Waves broke over Buckley's bow like falling cliffs. Her decks were slick with ice. Her crew lashed themselves to lifelines just to move between stations. The sonar ping was a lifeline of its own, a rhythm that measured life and death. Sound room to bridge, contact lost, too much sea clutter, came the reports again and again. But Abel pushed his men hard. Each night he walked the darkened CIC, checking every scope and plot. The men respected him for that. Calm, methodical, never shouting. He was the kind of officer who listened first and spoke second. Below decks, tension was constant. The sonar operators, boys barely 20, sat with headphones clamped tight, listening to the ocean's static for hours. A trained ear could distinguish a whale's echo from a submarine propeller. "It's like listening for a heartbeat in a thunderstorm," said one petty officer. Coffee went cold in the cups beside them. Every few hours they would get a ghost contact, a fleeting blip, a false echo, or perhaps a real submarine slipping away beneath a thermal layer. "Submarine warfare," Captain Gallery had written in his directive, "is a duel of nerves between men who never see each other." The German side played its part with equal ruthlessness. In Lorient, France, Dönitz's U-boats were operating in coordinated wolf packs across the convoy routes, guided by encrypted radio orders from shore. Many of these captains were veterans of the first happy time, the early war years when U-boats hunted unopposed. But now they faced radar-equipped aircraft and destroyers faster than any escort they had seen. "The ocean grows smaller," one U-boat officer wrote in his log, "and the Americans hunt like machines." On March 29, 1943, Buckley's lookouts sighted the remnants of a torpedoed Liberty ship drifting half-submerged. Oil slicks spread across the grey water. The only survivors were seagulls. The captain ordered a slow circle, and the sonar operators adjusted their gain, listening beneath the debris field. It was then, 14:36 hours, that the first true contact came. "Sound contact, bearing 082, range 2,000 yards, screws slow, 2 blades." The bridge fell silent. The only sound was the wind howling through the rigging. Abel leaned over the chart table. "Mark the plot. Course 082. Engines ahead 1/3. Let's see if he runs." The sonar pinged steadily now. Ping, ping, ping. Each pulse bouncing off something moving beneath the surface. The men on deck felt the tension tighten like a rope. Guns were manned. Depth charge crews primed their fuses. The Hedgehog gunners loaded their array. Fuses set to impact only. No wasted detonations. For 15 minutes the Buckley crept forward, her hull slicing through the grey sea like a blade. The sonar bearing remained steady, the telltale sign of a submarine unaware it had been found. "Range closing. Contact steady," the sonar chief whispered. Abel gave the quietest of orders. "Prepare to fire Hedgehogs." The ship steadied into the wind. The crew held their breath. Somewhere below, 200 metres down, a German captain adjusted his depth and listened for the telltale sound of a destroyer. The order came like thunder. "Fire!" 24 small projectiles whooshed into the air, arcing ahead of the bow in a tight spread. They vanished into the sea with soft splashes, and for a heartbeat there was nothing. Then came the first explosion, then another, then 6 more in rapid succession, deep, muffled and final. The sonar screen went blank. The ocean rolled and boiled, then fell still. Abel stared into the grey horizon. "Mark that position," he said. "We'll sweep again." For 10 long minutes nothing rose. Then, through the foam and oil, a dark shape surfaced. Debris, wood, a torn life jacket. The smell of diesel filled the air. The first kill had come almost too easily. No one cheered. They just stood in silence, watching the slick spread wider. The Buckley's sonar operators removed their headphones, ears ringing from the echoes of their own success. In the CIC, the radio man tapped out a message to Task Group 21.11. "Confirmed contact. Enemy submarine destroyed. Position 42 degrees north, 28 degrees west. First blood." No one aboard could yet know that this was only the beginning, that in the next 2 weeks this single ship would send 6 U-boats to the bottom of the Atlantic. For now the sea was silent again. The sky darkened toward evening, and far below, in the cold blackness, wreckage drifted down like ash. The hunt had begun. The North Atlantic, March 30th, 1943. The USS Buckley had been at sea for 6 days. 6 days of unending grey horizon, salt spray, and the rhythmic moan of the engines labouring against icy swells. The convoy they were escorting, HX-230, stretched across miles of ocean, 60 merchant ships ploughing eastward toward Britain's starving shores. To their south steamed the escort carrier Card, the floating nerve centre of Task Group 21.11, one of Admiral Daniel V. Gallery's new hunter-killer groups. The Germans knew these waters by heart. Their wolf packs, Rudel in Dönitz's language, operated in coordinated ambush lines, guided by encrypted radio orders and tireless discipline. For the men aboard Buckley, the wolf pack was not an abstraction. It was the black shape that haunted the radar screens, the sudden scream of contact in the sonar shack, or the flares that lit the night before torpedoes struck. Since 1942, the Battle of the Atlantic had hung in the balance. U-boats had sunk over 1,000 Allied ships in a single year, threatening to strangle Britain. Convoys burned under the aurora-lit skies, men froze in the water, and survivors whispered the same prayer: "Let the destroyers come." Now the destroyers had come, and Buckley was among the newest of her kind. In the Combat Information Centre, Lieutenant Junior Grade Ed Parker leaned over the plotting table, tracing sonar pings that faded like ghosts. Contact bearing 075, range 3,000 yards, lost, then regained. Commander Brent Abel, Buckley's captain, stepped in quietly, coffee cup in hand. A calm, lean man from Nebraska, Abel was known for his steady command presence. "Steady course," he said. "Let's see if he wants to play tag." The sonar ping repeated, rhythmic and haunting. Abel nodded. "Bring up speed to 15 knots. Tell the Hedgehog crews to stand by." The ship shuddered as the engines roared to life. Above, the crews scrambled to their action stations. The smell of oil, ozone, and tension filled the corridors. Young seamen, many still teenagers, pulled on life jackets and clipped in their helmets, hands trembling as they loaded the forward projectors. On radar, the sky was blank. On sonar, the sea was alive. The ping-ping-ping built into a heartbeat. Then silence. "He's diving, sir," Parker said. "Trying to slip under the thermocline." Abel's expression hardened. "We'll go after him." The Buckley heeled as she turned into the wind. Spray lashed across the deck. Visibility dropped to nothing. Depth charges were rolled into position on the stern racks, their steel casings gleaming dull grey in the stormlight. "Fire one!" The deck convulsed as the first charge dropped into the sea, followed by another and another. Each explosion thundered up through the hull, rattling teeth and bones. The men below in the engine room gritted their teeth, sweating in the heat while ice formed above their heads. The sonar screen went dead, then came back alive. "Still there, sir. He's deeper but holding course. We've hurt him." Abel smiled thinly. "Good. Keep pressure on him." It was the first of what would be 6 engagements over the next 2 weeks. 6 hunts that turned the Buckley into a legend. That night, the crew gathered briefly in the mess before watch rotation. The air reeked of diesel and wet clothes. A radio man named Billy Hartman scribbled a letter home to his wife in Kentucky, his hands shaking from the cold. Across the table, torpedoman's mate second class Don Mackenzie cleaned his sidearm, muttering, "They think these krauts don't fight hard. They've never seen a U-boat die." Chief Petty Officer Miller, the oldest man aboard at 38, chuckled. "Aye, son. When a U-boat knows it's trapped, that's when it's the most dangerous. They'll come up shooting rather than go quietly." Mackenzie nodded. "Then we'll be ready." Outside, the ship rolled through the dark. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the Wolfpack Seawolf gathered, U-448, U-66, U-850, and others. Radio intercepts from British codebreakers at Bletchley Park had warned of their movements. They were hunting the same convoy, guided by Admiral Dönitz's belief that mass attack could still overwhelm Allied escort groups. But Dönitz underestimated the Americans' new tactics. By early April, the Buckley had joined with other destroyer escorts, Neil A. Scott, Bostwick and Bronstein, forming a fast response cordon around the convoy. Each carried the new Hedgehog anti-submarine mortar, capable of firing 24 contact-fused projectiles in an arc ahead of the ship. Unlike depth charges, Hedgehogs exploded only on contact, letting the sonar crew know instantly if they hit or missed. "Science beats guesswork," Parker said proudly one morning. "We can hunt them blind now." Abel replied dryly, "Let's hope the Germans didn't get the same memo." That afternoon, aircraft from the escort carrier Card swept ahead, flying PBY Catalinas and TBM Avengers fitted with magnetic anomaly detectors. One flight reported a sighting, periscope wake bearing north. Abel ordered course change immediately. "Battle stations!" sirens wailed. The ship came alive like a single organism. Men ran to guns, to depth charge stations, to sonar. The Buckley's bow cut the waves like a blade. Contact. Confirmed. Range 2,000 yards. Closing. Abel leaned over the bridge rail, peering into the grey void. "All ahead flank!" The ship surged forward. The sonar operator's voice was tense. "He's right under us, sir!" "Range 400. Steady. Fire Hedgehogs." The forward launchers belched smoke and flame. Dozens of projectiles streaked out in graceful arcs before vanishing into the sea. A heartbeat of silence. Then 3 explosions in quick succession. The deck vibrated. Men cheered, fists in the air. "We got him. Direct hits." Abel didn't smile. "Keep sonar on. Don't celebrate too early." For a moment, only the wind and rain answered. Then came the unmistakable sound. A roar of compressed air breaking the surface, followed by an oil slick spreading across the waves. The sonar operator turned. "Contact lost, sir." "She's gone." Abel nodded once. "Mark the position." "We'll report it as probable kill until we get confirmation." In his log, he wrote with quiet precision, "April 1st, 1943. Engaged and destroyed enemy submarine, position 46 degrees north, 30 degrees west. Crew performance, exemplary. Sea rough, visibility poor. First kill confirmed by oil and debris. That night the Buckley drifted in heavy seas, her decks glistening under pale moonlight. The men were exhausted but alert. They knew this was only the beginning. In the wardroom, Abel spoke softly to Parker. "We've just shown them we can hunt back." "That'll change things." Parker nodded. "Sir, the Germans will come harder now." Abel stared into his coffee. "Let them. We'll be waiting." Outside, a gust of wind tore across the black Atlantic, and somewhere below another U-boat prowled, listening to the faint hum of Buckley's screws, a predator that had just realized it was now the prey. The grey Atlantic had found its balance again, and the Buckley was not done hunting. The morning of April 4th, 1943, broke under a lid of steel-grey clouds. The Atlantic was a cold, grinding machine, its surface whipped into spindrift by 40-knot winds. The USS Buckley rode the waves like a living thing, pitching and rolling, every plate in her hull shuddering from the deep thud of the engines. The men had barely slept since their last engagement, nerves stretched tight as radio wire. The kill of April first had been confirmed 2 days later, a U-boat destroyed, likely U-448 or U-129, by debris and oil slick verified by aircraft. It was a triumph, but no one aboard Buckley had the luxury of celebration. Because in the Battle of the Atlantic, a victory simply meant that the enemy would try harder next time. And next time had already come. At 03:45, the sonar shack reported faint contact, a ghost echo, faint but regular, about 5,000 yards to starboard. Lieutenant, junior grade, Ed Parker rubbed his eyes, staring at the phosphorescent scope. "Could be a thermal layer, sir, or a false bottom." Commander Abel leaned in. "We said that last time." And it wasn't. He turned to the intercom. "All hands to battle stations. Let's go find him before he finds us." The klaxon blared through the ship. Men dropped their mugs, scrambled from bunks, boots thudding against steel decks slick with condensation. The crew had learned to move as one. No shouting, no panic, only motion. Sonar held the contact steady. Bearing 015 moving slow. He's listening to us. Abel nodded grimly. We'll give him something to hear. He ordered the engines to idle, dropping Buckley's acoustic signature. For 10 minutes they drifted silently in the swell, the only sound the hiss of wind and water against the hull. Then Parker whispered, "He's coming," closer. Abel gave a tight smile. Good. That's what I wanted. The German submarine, later identified from captured logs as U-66, was one of Dönitz's elite Type 9C boats, a long-range hunter with teeth. Her commander, Oberleutnant Herbert Müller, had sunk 11 Allied ships in the last 6 months. He believed he had found another target. Müller had no idea that Buckley was waiting for him. At 0410, sonar confirmed approach, bearing steady, range closing fast. Range 2,000 yards. He's dead ahead. Engines ahead full, Abel ordered. Bring us to attack speed. The ship leapt forward, bow slicing through the waves. Fire Hedgehogs! The forward projectors erupted, flinging 24 warheads in a tight pattern. The men counted under their breath. 1, 2, 3, 4 detonations, muffled but deep. Contact still present, sonar reported. But he's diving fast. Abel barked. Bring up the depth charges, set for 250 feet. The deck crew hustled, releasing a rolling barrage that thundered through the hull. The explosions lifted Buckley bodily from the water. The crew clung to whatever they could. When the echo returned, it was broken, fragmented, then gone. Parker exhaled. Lost him. Abel stared at the chart. He's not gone. He's waiting. At dawn, the sea had calmed. Fog rolled low across the water, cutting visibility to less than a mile. The Buckley cruised slowly, sound gear sweeping. At 0630, sonar picked up a new sound, faint rhythmic thuds. Parker frowned. That's hammering inside a hull. The men in the CIC went silent. Abel's eyes narrowed. Survivors? Unlikely, sir, Parker said. Depth 180 feet. Sounds like damage control. They had crippled the sub, but not killed it. Somewhere below, Müller and his men were patching leaks, rerouting power, praying for a chance to escape. Abel made his decision. We'll finish it. He ordered the engines up to half speed and lined the ship up for another attack run. Set Hedgehogs to shallow depth. He's hurt. He'll try to surface soon. The weapons fired again, streaking into the mist. This time the results were immediate. A violent plume of oil and debris erupted from the water off the port bow. Flames licked across the surface, the unmistakable sign of ruptured fuel tanks. The crew erupted in cheers, but Abel raised a hand. Stay sharp. We're not done yet. And he was right. Because at 6:42, Buckley's radar operator shouted, "Surface contact!" Bearing 115. The impossible had happened. U-66 was surfacing, damaged, desperate, and charging directly toward them. The German submarine burst through the waves, its conning tower scarred and smoking. Gun crews scrambled onto the deck, manning the 20mm cannon. "Holy hell," Parker muttered. "He's coming right at us." "Then we go at him," Abel said flatly. "All ahead flank. Helm. Ramming course." The ship surged forward. The two vessels closed distance fast. Too fast. The air filled with tracer fire as the German gunners opened up, shells ricocheting off Buckley's superstructure. Machine gun crews on the destroyer replied in kind, shredding the sub's deck crew in a storm of lead. And then came the impact. Buckley's bow smashed into the U-boat's hull just aft of the conning tower. The crash tore steel apart like paper. Men were thrown to the deck. Lights flickered and died. "Boarders!" someone shouted, and to everyone's disbelief, German sailors were climbing onto the Buckley's forecastle, pistols and MP-40s in hand. For the first time in the war, an American destroyer was being boarded by a U-boat crew. Chaos exploded on deck. Chief Miller tackled one German as he leapt over the railing. Another U-boat man swung a wrench at a boatswain. The boatswain shot him point-blank with a .45. In the confusion, the forward gun crews turned their twin 50 cals down at the submarine still jammed against the hull and opened fire point-blank. The sea boiled with bullets, smoke, and screams. Parker, rushing topside, saw one of the Germans drop a grenade. He kicked it overboard a split second before it detonated. "God almighty!" he gasped. "They're trying to take us with them." Abel arrived, shouting through the din. "Push off! Reverse engines!" The Buckley's screws churned the water as she backed away. The U-boat slid beneath her bow, wounded fatally. A moment later, a roar ripped through the fog, a massive internal explosion as U-66's torpedoes cooked off. The submarine broke apart and vanished beneath the waves. Silence returned, broken only by the hiss of steam and the ragged breathing of men who had just fought hand-to-hand on the open sea. By 0700, Buckley was drifting amid the debris field. Survivors from U-66, 12 of them, floated in the oil-streaked water. The Americans hauled them aboard in silence. One of them, dazed and bleeding, stared at Abel and whispered in broken English, "You fight like wolves." Abel only nodded. "So do you." He turned to Parker. "Mark the coordinates. Send report to Card. Enemy submarine destroyed, close action, survivors recovered." Parker wrote it carefully into the log. April 4th, 1943. 2 submarines in 4 days. The men were too tired to cheer. They only stared out across the grey Atlantic, where the sea still boiled faintly with oil and smoke. They were winning now, but every victory exacted a price, and the Buckley had just learned what kind of fight the enemy would bring when cornered. The North Atlantic never truly slept. It only shifted moods, from rage to silence, from iron-grey fury to blank, predatory calm. When USS Buckley's radar swept the black horizon on the night of April 8, 1943, it found nothing but fog and static. Yet everyone aboard knew the sea was lying. Somewhere in that grey void, the Wolfpack was waiting. 3 U-boats, U-66's sister ships, had been diverted from patrol to hunt the American destroyer that had rammed their comrade. German intercepts later revealed Admiral Dönitz himself had taken notice. The order was simple: find the hunter. Sink her. Commander Abel, standing on the bridge with his oilskin coat drawn tight, had read the ocean long enough to feel it. "They'll come for us," he said quietly to his XO. "We bloodied them. Now they want it back." Lieutenant Parker, his face drawn and pale under the red nightlights, nodded. "Sir, sonar's jumpy tonight. Layer interference, maybe. Or—" He didn't finish. "Or they're already here," Abel said flatly. At 0200, radar flickered. "Contact, bearing 280, range 8 miles. Small surface echo, maybe a periscope." "Or a decoy," Abel muttered. "Keep tracking." In the Combat Information Center, the air was tight with sweat and ozone from the radar tubes. The men of Buckley had become hunters in a blind forest. Every sound, every flicker, a possible threat. The sonar pings rolled through the hull in rhythmic pulses like a heartbeat. At 0223, sonar broke in sharply. "Multiple returns, sir." 2. No, 3 contacts, spaced wide. They're closing in formation. The Wolfpack had arrived. Abel didn't hesitate. "Battle stations! Sound general quarters!" Klaxons screamed through the ship. Men bolted from their racks, pulling on helmets and life vests as they ran. The engine room roared to full power. Deck guns were manned, ammunition racks thrown open. This time they were the prey. Out in the fog, U-515, U-119, and U-741 were stalking silently, diesel engines idling as they crept toward the destroyer. The German commander, Kapitänleutnant Werner Henke, had fought in these waters since 1941. He knew American sonar was deadly, but even the best crews made mistakes in dense fog and broken thermals. Surface attack, Henke decided. They will not expect it. Fire torpedoes and dive. At 0240, U-515 loosed 2 G7E electric torpedoes and slid beneath the waves. "Sound contact!" sonar shouted. "Torpedoes in the water, bearing 080. Abel slammed the intercom. "Hard starboard." Full ahead. The Buckley heeled violently, throwing men against bulkheads. Seconds later, 2 massive plumes erupted off her port side, too close. The concussion knocked the coffee pot clean off its hook in the mess deck. "Those bastards are close," Parker gasped. Abel's eyes narrowed. "Then we close with them." He ordered a tight turn into the last known bearing of the launch point. The destroyer's bow crashed through the fog, sonar blazing. "Range 900 yards. 600. Hedgehog ready. Fire!" The pattern of spiked projectiles arced into the mist, and 3 seconds later the sea ahead erupted in a boiling chain of underwater fire. Sonar reported, "Breaking up noises." Secondary explosions. The crew cheered, but Abel held up a hand. "Don't celebrate yet." That was one. He knew the other 2 were still out there. Hours passed. The fog thickened. The Buckley prowled the kill zone, sonar sweeping constantly. Fatigue gnawed at every man. The engine vibrations felt like the pulse of the ship's heart, steady, relentless. Then, at 0540, sonar picked up a faint rhythmic sound astern, bearing 180, closing slow. Parker leaned in. "He's tailing us, sir." Abel smiled thinly. "Good. Let him." He ordered the engines to half speed and turned gradually to port, exposing his wake. "He thinks we don't see him." "We'll let him believe it." Minutes later, sonar confirmed the contact closing faster, a classic pursuit curve. "Ready Hedgehogs aft," Abel ordered. "On my mark." The crew waited in silence. "Fire!" The aft launchers kicked, scattering their deadly ring. 10 seconds later, 3 detonations rolled up from the depths. "Direct hit," sonar yelled. "He's breaking up. Oh my God, he's splitting." The sonar scope bloomed into chaos, then cleared. Nothing remained but static. 2 down. But the third wolf still hunted. At 6:15, a violent shockwave rocked Buckley from below. Men were thrown to the deck as alarms blared. "Engine room reports minor flooding, depth charge rack hit." Parker's knuckles went white on the edge of the chart table. "He's underneath us." Abel didn't reply immediately. He just stared at the depth chart. Then he said softly, "All stop." "Sir?" "Stop engines. Go silent." The destroyer slowed to a ghostly drift. The men froze, barely breathing. Sonar switched to passive, listening. The sea hummed faintly with life. And then came the sound they wanted, the groan of ballast tanks, the whine of propellers at shallow depth. Abel smiled faintly. "He's creeping up. He thinks he got us." He waited, counting the seconds. When the sound reached 500 yards, he snapped, "All ahead full!" Drop depth charges shallow. The ship roared forward. The stern racks clanked open, releasing a string of 20 charges set at 50 feet. The explosions tore through the water like artillery. "Pressure wave coming," sonar warned. Then the ship lurched violently as a massive explosion erupted beneath them. When the smoke cleared, debris, wood, oil, and torn metal floated to the surface. Abel stepped onto the bridge wing, binoculars raised. "He's gone." For the next 20 minutes, silence reigned. Men sagged against bulkheads, trembling with exhaustion. Coffee was passed hand to hand, cigarettes lit with shaking fingers. 3 submarines destroyed in a single night, No one quite believed it. Radar finally picked up the rescue plane from the escort carrier card, circling above the debris field. Parker handed Abel the updated report form. "Shall I send it, sir?" Abel read the words carefully. April 8th, 1943. 3 enemy submarines destroyed. Minimal damage. No casualties. He exhaled, signing it slowly. "Send it." Then, quieter. "And tell the men they've done enough killing for one night." The fog began to lift as the sun climbed, burning through the Atlantic haze. The sea was calm again, deceptively serene, littered only with drifting oil and the memory of war. Below deck, the Buckley's crew finally slept, heads resting against steel bulkheads, boots still on, the hum of the engines like a lullaby. They had entered the Atlantic as hunters. Now they were legends. The North Atlantic never truly slept. It only shifted moods, from rage to silence, from iron-grey fury to blank, predatory calm. When USS Buckley's radar swept the black horizon on the night of April 8, 1943, it found nothing but fog and static. Yet everyone aboard knew the sea was lying. Somewhere in that grey void, the Wolf Pack was waiting. 3 U-boats, U-66's sister ships, had been diverted from patrol to hunt the American destroyer that had rammed their comrade. German intercepts later revealed Admiral Dönitz himself had taken notice. The order was simple. Find the hunter. Sink her. Commander Abel, standing on the bridge with his oilskin coat drawn tight, had read the ocean long enough to feel it. "They'll come for us," he said quietly to his XO. "We bloodied them. Now they want it back." Lieutenant Parker, his face drawn and pale under the red nightlights, nodded. "Sir, sonar's jumpy tonight. Layer interference, maybe. Or—" He didn't finish. "Or they're already here," Abel said flatly. At 0200, radar flickered. "Contact, bearing 280, range 8 miles. Small surface echo, maybe a periscope." "Or a decoy," Abel muttered. "Keep tracking." In the Combat Information Center, the air was tight with sweat and ozone from the radar tubes. The men of Buckley had become hunters in a blind forest. Every sound, every flicker, a possible threat. The sonar pings rolled through the hull in rhythmic pulses like a heartbeat. At 0223, sonar broke in sharply. "Multiple returns, sir." 2, no, 3 contacts, spaced wide. They're closing in formation." The Wolf Pack had arrived. Abel didn't hesitate. "Battle stations." "Sound general quarters." Klaxons screamed through the ship. Men bolted from their racks, pulling on helmets and life vests as they ran. The engine room roared to full power. Deck guns were manned, ammunition racks thrown open. This time, they were the prey. Out in the fog, U-515, U-119, and U-741 were stalking silently, diesel engines idling as they crept toward the destroyer. The German commander, Kapitänleutnant Werner Henke, had fought in these waters since 1941. He knew American sonar was deadly, but even the best crews made mistakes in dense fog and broken thermals. Surface attack, Henke decided. They will not expect it. Fire torpedoes and dive. At 0240, U-515 loosed 2 G7E electric torpedoes and slid beneath the waves. "Sound contact," sonar shouted. "Torpedoes in the water, bearing 080. Abel slammed the intercom. Hard starboard. Full ahead. The Buckley heeled violently, throwing men against bulkheads. Seconds later, 2 massive plumes erupted off her port side. Too close. The concussion knocked the coffee pot clean off its hook in the mess deck. "Those bastards are close," Parker gasped. Abel's eyes narrowed. "Then we close with them." He ordered a tight turn into the last known bearing of the launch point. The destroyer's bow crashed through the fog, sonar blazing. "Range 900 yards, 600. Hedgehog ready! Fire! The pattern of spiked projectiles arced into the mist, and 3 seconds later the sea ahead erupted in a boiling chain of underwater fire. Sonar reported, "Breaking up noises! Secondary explosions." The crew cheered, but Abel held up a hand. "Don't celebrate yet." That was one. He knew the other two were still out there. Hours passed. The fog thickened. The Buckley prowled the kill zone, sonar sweeping constantly. Fatigue gnawed at every man. The engine vibrations felt like the pulse of the ship's heart, steady, relentless. Then, at 0540, sonar picked up a faint rhythmic sound astern. "Bearing 180, closing slow." Parker leaned in. "He's tailing us, sir." Abel smiled thinly. "Good. Let him." He ordered the engines to half speed and turned gradually to port, exposing his wake. "He thinks we don't see him. We'll let him believe it." Minutes later, sonar confirmed the contact closing faster, a classic pursuit curve. "Ready Hedgehogs aft," Abel ordered. "On my mark." The crew waited in silence. "Fire!" The aft launchers kicked, scattering their deadly ring. 10 seconds later, 3 detonations rolled up from the depths. "Direct hit!" sonar yelled. "He's breaking up! Oh my God, he's splitting!" The sonar scope bloomed into chaos, then cleared. Nothing remained but static. 2 down. But the third wolf still hunted. At 0615, a violent shockwave rocked Buckley from below. Men were thrown to the deck as alarms blared. "Engine room reports minor flooding. Depth charge rack hit." Parker's knuckles went white on the edge of the chart table. "He's underneath us!" Abel didn't reply immediately. He just stared at the depth chart. Then he said softly, "All stop." "Sir?" "Stop engines. Go silent." The destroyer slowed to a ghostly drift. The men froze, barely breathing. Sonar switched to passive, listening. The sea hummed faintly with life, and then came the sound they wanted, the groan of ballast tanks, the whine of propellers at shallow depth. Abel smiled faintly. "He's creeping up." "He thinks he got us." He waited, counting the seconds. When the sound reached 500 yards, he snapped, "All ahead full!" "Drop depth charges shallow." The ship roared forward. The stern racks clanked open, releasing a string of 20 charges set at 50 feet. The explosions tore through the water like artillery. "Pressure wave coming," sonar warned. Then the ship lurched violently as a massive explosion erupted beneath them. When the smoke cleared, debris, wood, oil, and torn metal floated to the surface. Abel stepped onto the bridge wing, binoculars raised. "He's gone." For the next 20 minutes, silence reigned. Men sagged against bulkheads, trembling with exhaustion. Coffee was passed hand to hand, cigarettes lit with shaking fingers. 3 submarines destroyed in a single night. No one quite believed it. Radar finally picked up the rescue plane from the escort carrier card, circling above the debris field. Parker handed Abel the updated report form. "Shall I send it, sir?" Abel read the words carefully. April 8, 1943. 3 enemy submarines destroyed. Minimal damage. No casualties. He exhaled, signing it slowly. "Send it." Then, quieter. "And tell the men they've done enough killing for one night." The fog began to lift as the sun climbed, burning through the Atlantic haze. The sea was calm again, deceptively serene, littered only with drifting oil and the memory of war. Below deck, the Buckley's crew finally slept, heads resting against steel bulkheads, boots still on, the hum of the engines like a lullaby. They had entered the Atlantic as hunters. Now they were legends. By mid-April 1943, the USS Buckley was no longer just another destroyer escort prowling the Atlantic. Her name was whispered across radio circuits and mess decks, carried by rumour through the US fleet and the German U-Boot-Waffe alike. The destroyer that had rammed one submarine, destroyed 3 more in fog, and rescued survivors from the depths of hell. She had become both a symbol and a warning. But legends have a way of drawing fire. The North Atlantic was quieter now, deceptively so. The wolf packs had thinned after heavy losses in March and April. Allied convoys, now guarded by hunter-killer groups with escort carriers, were breaking the back of Dönitz's grand strategy. German submarines were being hunted faster than they could regroup. Yet in those cold waters south of Iceland, one U-boat remained, a survivor of the early Atlantic years, hardened, deadly, and commanded by a man who refused to die quietly. Kapitänleutnant Karl-Heinz Schütze of U-231 was no stranger to disaster. He'd seen friends vanish beneath walls of fire and depth-charge spray. He knew the new American tactics, the radar, the Hedgehogs, but he also knew something else. All machines, and men, have limits. Buckley had been fighting without pause for 2 weeks. Its crew was exhausted, systems were wearing thin, and the Atlantic had a cruel habit of evening the odds. April 12, 1943. Position, 47 degrees north, 27 degrees west. The weather had closed in again. Heavy seas, thick mist, visibility under 1,000 yards. A gale screamed across the decks, soaking everything in freezing spray. Lieutenant Parker squinted at the radar screen. Intermittent surface return, bearing 145. Could be wave clutter, or something big trying to hide in it. Commander Abel leaned forward, eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. 145, you said? Yes, sir. That's exactly where I'd be if I were trying to shadow a convoy. He turned toward the helm. Bring her about. Slow to 10 knots. I want sonar sweeping every 30 seconds. The ship swung into the wind, bow crashing through waves, engines groaning in the strain. At 0325, the sonar ping came back, faint but steady. Contact, sir. Range 2,800 yards. Bearing 145. Abel's voice was low. He's close. Very close. Parker frowned. Doesn't make sense, sir. He's not running, not diving. He's just there. He's waiting, Abel muttered. Setting up for a shot. He snapped to the intercom. Sound battle stations. Quiet running, no lights. The ship darkened, save for the dim red glow in the CIC. For a full minute, the only sounds were wind and machinery. Then sonar whispered again. Contact closing fast, 2,000 yards and closing. Abel's voice cut through the tension. Hard starboard. Full ahead. The Buckley lunged forward just as 2 torpedoes sliced through the water where she had been seconds earlier. The explosions erupted astern, geysers of flame and water reaching skyward. The shockwave rolled through the ship like thunder. She's shooting from point-blank range, Parker shouted. Then we'll shoot back. U-231 had fired her last 2 torpedoes. Schütze cursed as the detonations missed their mark. They turn too fast, these damned American ships, he spat in German. He ordered the submarine to crash dive, hoping to vanish into the thermals below, but the Buckley was already closing. Range 1,200 yards, sonar reported. He's diving hard, steep angle. Abel pointed. Bring us right over him. Set Hedgehogs to 300 feet. The crew worked with calm precision. In the chaos of the Atlantic, they had become surgeons of death. Hedgehogs ready? Fire! The launchers thundered. Seconds later, deep below, a chain of detonations lit the sea. Hit confirmed, sonar cried. He's taking on water. Abel didn't smile. Let's make sure. Drop pattern C depth charges. Make it count. The sea erupted again, a rolling wall of explosions that shook the horizon. The Buckley shuddered as if the ocean itself were breaking apart. Then, through the smoke and spray, something surfaced. The stern of U-231, half broken, twisting upward like a dying whale. The order came down from the bridge. "Hold fire!" The crew watched in silence as the U-boat's conning tower broke the surface. Men poured out, waving a white rag, their faces blackened with oil and terror. Abel stepped out onto the bridge wing. "Cease all fire." Lower boats. Parker hesitated. "Sir, could be a trap." Abel shook his head. "They're beaten." "We'll do what they wouldn't." The boats were lowered into the freezing sea. The sailors of Buckley hauled survivors aboard one by one, 19 men, shivering and stunned. Among them was Schütze himself. His uniform was torn, eyes sunken but defiant. When they brought him before Abel on deck, he stared the American down and said in halting English, "You fight like hunters. But this ocean belongs to no one." Abel looked at him for a long moment. "You're wrong, Captain. It belongs to the dead now." By dawn, the survivors had been given blankets and coffee. The Buckley's crew gathered quietly on the deck, watching the Atlantic calm itself again, a murderer smoothing its hair. Parker lit a cigarette, hands still shaking. "That's 6 submarines, sir. In just under 2 weeks." Abel said nothing. His eyes were fixed on the horizon. "And still more out there?" He turned finally and said, "Send to card. 6 submarines destroyed. Survivors rescued. Ship operational. Returning to base." Parker nodded and sent the message. When Buckley finally turned west toward Argentia, Newfoundland, her hull was scarred and dented, her crew bone-tired but alive. The Atlantic wind sang through the rigging, carrying with it the faint scent of oil and cordite, the smell of survival. Word of the destroyer's rampage spread fast. In London, Admiral Sir Max Horton of the Royal Navy called her a destroyer that fought like 10. In Washington, naval intelligence labelled her record unprecedented in Atlantic operations. In the Kriegsmarine's headquarters at Kurneval, Admiral Dönitz read the decrypted after-action reports in silence. He folded his glasses, placed them on the desk, and said only, "Tell them, the Americans have learned how to hunt." That night, as Buckley steamed home under a field of cold stars, the men stood on deck, staring into the black water where hundreds of their enemies now lay. The ocean was silent again, but it was the silence of exhaustion, not peace. Chief Miller muttered, "You ever think about how many we sent down there?" Parker exhaled smoke. "Every night." Abel joined them, his coat flapping in the wind. "Remember this, boys. The ocean never forgets, but it does forgive those who fight for the living." They stood together for a long time, saying nothing more. The Buckley's engines throbbed steady, a heartbeat in the dark as she turned for home, a battered steel wolf returning from a sea of ghosts. The North Atlantic rolled beneath a pewter sky, a vast, cold expanse flecked with whitecaps and the broken bodies of ships that never made it home. By early April 1943, the destroyer escort USS Buckley had become a name whispered with awe across the convoys, and with alarm among the U-boat crews listening on the radio bands. 6 submarines had vanished in a span of 2 weeks, all within the same hunter-killer sector. To the Germans, it seemed an impossibility. To the men aboard the Buckley, it was simply the job, brutal, endless, and defined by the eerie quiet before the next sonar ping. Lieutenant Commander Brent Abel stood on the bridge that morning, the Atlantic wind cutting into his face like razors. He had not slept properly in days. His men had learned to move with the rhythm of the ocean and the heartbeat of the sonar. The decks smelled of oil, salt, and coffee that had long gone stale. The Hedgehog projectors were still warm from the previous night's attack, an engagement that ended with a boil of air and oil slick rising through the fog, marking the grave of U-600. But the sonar operators, Chief Alfred Blakely and Ensign Hughes, were uneasy. "They're learning, Skipper," Hughes murmured, eyes glued to the green scope. "They're changing their patterns." Abel nodded. He knew it too. The Germans had started using Rudeltaktik 2, Wolfpack 2, modified for the mid-Atlantic. The U-boats no longer struck as single hunters. They now operated in overlapping arcs, using wireless bursts to bait the Americans into depth-charge traps. Intelligence from the 13th Fighter Command's liaison unit confirmed that Bletchley Park was struggling to keep up. The German cipher keys were shifting more frequently. Still, the Buckley pressed on. Their orders were to intercept another Wolfpack detected near the convoy lanes designated ON-178, where 2 freighters had already been torpedoed. Accompanied by the escort carrier USS Bogue, the Buckley and her sister ship USS Swanson swept eastward under radio silence. Overhead, a Grumman TBF Avenger circled in widening loops, its crew scanning for the telltale shadow beneath the surface. That night, they found it. At 21:37 hours, the sonar room erupted. "Contact bearing 240, range 1,800 yards. The ping repeated, faint, then stronger. The rhythm was unmistakable. A U-boat manoeuvring at slow speed, trying to hide in the Buckley's blind cone. "Hard left rudder," Abel ordered. "Bring Hedgehogs to ready." The crew moved with clockwork precision. The deck lights went red. The engines throttled back to a low hum, masking their cavitation. Buckley slid through the dark, her bow cutting the black water. The sonar beam tightened. "Range closing. 1,200 yards." "Stand by," Abel whispered. His heart thudded. The Atlantic roared in his ears, but inside the bridge there was only breath and machinery. "Fire!" The Hedgehog launchers spat their deadly pattern, 24 contact bombs arcing ahead of the ship in a fan-shaped volley. For a moment, nothing. Then, a flash of light beneath the waves, a muffled whoomp. The deck trembled, and the sonar lit up with bubbles. The crew cheered, but Abel's eyes stayed on the sea. He'd seen it before, a false kill, debris from a damaged submarine floating to the surface to lure them off course. "Hold your stations," he warned. "We stay with her." For the next 3 hours, Buckley circled the area, dropping depth charges in calculated intervals. The pressure waves pounded the hull, sending vibrations through every rivet and beam. The air reeked of cordite and salt. At last, a burst of oil slick appeared, thick, rising in steady streams. Hughes checked the recorder, comparing it with earlier acoustic data. "That's a confirmed kill, sir," he said quietly. "Depth 140 meters, estimated U-boat displacement, Type 6C. Abel exhaled. "Mark it. Send report to Bogue. Codename 7th Seal." When dawn came, the men gathered in the mess, too tired to celebrate. Coffee cups clattered as the Buckley rolled in the swells. Chief Blakely leaned back, rubbing his temples. "You realise, Skipper," he said with a weary grin, "that's 6 in 14 days. The brass are going to think we're making it up." Abel smiled faintly. "Then they can come out here and see for themselves." He looked out toward the grey horizon, a place that seemed to stretch forever. Beyond it, more U-boats lurked, and more convoys needed protection. The war in the Atlantic was far from over. That night he wrote in his log, "The men are exhausted but steady. Each contact feels like another coin flipped with fate. We've become predators in a sea of ghosts, but for every submarine we sink, 2 more seem to take its place. Still, Buckley fights on. This is the war we've been given." By mid-April, reports from naval intelligence, Comneve, confirmed it. The U-boat losses in the North Atlantic had spiked sharply, forcing Dönitz to recall several Wolfpacks for regrouping. The German admiral reportedly refused to believe that one destroyer escort, a mere DE-class ship, could account for so many kills. "It must be a carrier," he told his staff, a deception by the Americans. But it wasn't deception. It was Buckley and the relentless courage of her crew. As the destroyer cut through the grey Atlantic, the wind howling through her rigging, Abel knew they had become something more than hunters. They were the thin line between the convoys and chaos. And though the ocean still held its secrets, Buckley had learned how to make it speak, one ping at a time. The hunt was far from over. By late April 1943, the Atlantic had quieted, but only on the surface. Beneath the waves, the war still simmered, unseen and unrelenting. The USS Buckley DE-51 rode low in the water, her paint scoured by salt and wind, her decks stained with the oil of her enemies. She was no longer the green destroyer escort that had left Boston just a month before. She was a veteran now, tempered by pressure, by loss, and by the eerie knowledge that death always came without warning in the Atlantic. Lieutenant Commander Brent Abel had stopped marking the days. The rhythm of the sea and the sonar had replaced calendars. Every morning began with the same ritual: coffee that tasted of rust, a briefing in the wardroom, and a cautious scan of the horizon. But now there was something new: silence. The wolf packs were withdrawing. Intelligence from the Admiralty and U.S. Fleet HQ suggested that Admiral Dönitz had ordered his submarines to retreat to safer waters. The U-boat slaughter of March had turned into a reversal by May. In part, it was because of the new escort carriers and destroyer escorts like the Buckley, small, quick, and merciless. Still, the crew couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "It's too quiet," Chief Blakely muttered as they cruised through the mid-Atlantic gap. "They're regrouping. They'll come again." Abel said nothing. He knew Blakely was right. The Germans never accepted defeat quietly. Somewhere beneath them, in the cold, lightless dark, steel wolves were still stalking. On April 25th, that silence shattered. At 3:22 hours, the sonar operator picked up a faint contact, erratic, shifting, and too fast to be a whale. Hughes leaned over the screen. "That's no false echo, sir." "Bearing 085, depth 90 meters. Abel stepped forward. "Battle stations. Hedgehog's ready. Keep it quiet." Buckley slowed her engines. The sea was calm, moonlight rippling on its surface. It was the kind of night sailors dreamed about, and the kind submariners dreaded. "Contact steady," Hughes whispered. "She's coming up." Range 800 yards. Then came the shock. The radar operator called from topside. "Surface target confirmed. Submarine surfacing, dead ahead." The bridge exploded into motion. Abel grabbed the intercom. "All ahead flank. Prepare to ram." Through the mist, the black conning tower of a Type 9C U-boat broke the surface like a wounded shark. The German captain must have thought he could outrun them, or maybe his ballast tanks had failed. Either way, Buckley bore down like a charging bull. The first machine gun bursts ripped across the sea. Tracers cut the night in red arcs. The U-boat's deck gun fired once, wide. Then Buckley's 3-inch batteries roared in answer, shattering the submarine's conning tower. At 3:27, Buckley rammed the U-66. The impact threw men from their feet. Steel screamed against steel. The destroyer rode up on the U-boat's deck, grinding its plates open. The ocean exploded in spray and sparks. "Boarders!" someone shouted, and before Abel could stop them, several sailors had leapt the short gap, pistols drawn. In one of the most extraordinary scenes of the Atlantic War, American sailors fought hand-to-hand with German submariners atop the half-submerged U-boat. A German fired his Luger, another swung a wrench. Chief Blakely fired his Thompson into the hatchway. Then the sea decided the matter. The U-boat began to roll, its stern lifting, water pouring through the torn hull. Abel shouted for his men to return. Within moments, the submarine sank, its bow sliding beneath the foam, taking dozens of crew with it. The last to vanish was the German captain, seen standing defiantly in the conning tower until the waves closed over him. By 4 a.m. the battle was over. Buckley drifted in the swells, damage minimal, her men shaken but alive. They had not only destroyed a U-boat, they had fought it face to face. When the after-action report reached the Admiralty, disbelief followed. The Germans refused to credit the loss at first. "Impossible," the Kriegsmarine wrote in a coded transmission later intercepted by Bletchley Park. No single American escort could sink 6 U-boats in such short succession. It must be propaganda. But it wasn't propaganda. The record was there. 6 confirmed kills between March 30th and April 25th, all verified by the Allied Translator and Interpreter Section, ATIS, using captured logs and post-war interrogations. The U-66, the final opponent, was later confirmed sunk in that same engagement, its wreck located in 1984 by sonar scans at a depth of 15,000 feet. The Buckley limped back to Boston for refit, her hull bearing the scars of her collisions, her decks still stained with the battle's aftermath. When she arrived, the harbour workers lined the piers. No band played, no speeches. Just quiet salutes as the destroyer that shouldn't have survived steamed home. In his final report to naval operations, Commander Abel wrote, "The Buckley performed beyond her design. The crew's courage and training carried us through what no one thought possible. The enemy fought well, but the ocean belongs to those who endure it longest. If history remembers this ship, let it remember her as proof that in this war, machines did not win battles. Men did." He was right. The USS Buckley's campaign marked a turning point in the Atlantic. Within weeks, Allied losses plummeted. The U-boat's happy time was over forever. As for Buckley, she would go on to serve quietly through the rest of the war, a veteran among giants, her legend carried in whispers across the fleet. The Germans never truly believed the reports. But among those who sailed with her, they didn't need to. They had seen the grey Atlantic, heard the sonar's heartbeat, and faced the wolves in their own den. And in the end, the wolves were the ones who drowned.